Welcome to the deep dive. So we've got these reports here all focused on, well, one specific day in a really high-profile case.
That's right.
And our mission today, just using this material you've shared, is to really unpack the key details, maybe some surprising moments from court that day.
Exactly. We're diving into reports on day 23 of the trial involving Sean Diddy Combs. The sources give us a very focused look at a New York courthouse, particularly testimony from a former assistant, and some other things too.
Yeah, it's definitely complex stuff, with the serious allegations, but the goal for us is pretty straightforward. Just using these reports help you get a clearer picture of what was actually presented on this day, pull out the essentials.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in and see what these sources actually lay out for us about day 23.
Okay, let's set the scene first then, based on what these reports say. Day 23, trial against Sean Diddy Combs' New York courthouse. And the reports list some, well, extremely serious charges he's facing.
Yeah, racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, transportation to engage in prostitution. It's all in there.
And the sources mention his arrest date, too.
Back in September 2024, they state he denies everything and has stayed in prison since then. Bail requests rejected.
Right.
And the reports also note federal agents are being examined now as part of the case.
Okay, so that kind of gives us the backdrop. Now, a big focus in these reports, as you said, is testimony from a former assistant. Who was this person, and what's sort of notable about him taking the stand?
So the reports name him as Jonathan Perez. He worked as Diddy's assistant. And what's really striking right off the bat from the sources is that he testified under immunity.
Immunity, okay.
Yeah, apparently he invoked the Fifth Amendment, the right not to incriminate yourself, and then the judge granted him immunity. So he could testify about potentially, well, problematic things without it being used against him later.
I see.
And the sources add he's reportedly the fourth witness in this trial to get that kind of status.
That's interesting context for sure. The reports say he worked for Diddy for quite a while, right? Like
Yeah.
December 2021 to September 2024.
Yeah, almost 3 years. And they even detail his salary started at, I think, $85K, went up to $100K.
Wow.
He described his workday as roughly like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., then a night assistant would take over. Apparently, Diddy had about maybe 3 or 4 personal assistants altogether.
And his boss was Christina Courtroom, Diddy's chief of staff.
That's what the reports say, yeah. And they also touch on, why Perez said he actually left the job.
What did he say about that?
He reportedly testified there was, and I quote, a lot going on personally for Mr. Combs, and also a lack of communication. He felt it was a good time to leave, saying he wanted to hopefully avoid a situation like this.
A situation like this, meaning the legal trouble, presumably?
Seems likely. The sources mentioned his last contact with Diddy was actually the day of the arrest, September 2024.
And how does he feel about Diddy now? Did they ask him that?
They did. And his reported answer on the stand, according to these sources, was, I feel great about him the same way I felt when I was leaving my employment.
Okay, so that covers his background and why he left. But then the testimony, as these reports detail it, it really zeroes in on some specific duties. There was a lot about arranging these king nights.
Yes, that came up quite a bit. Perez described king nights in his testimony as, well, Diddy going to a hotel to have private time with a female.
Okay. So how were they arranged? What did he say was involved in setting these up?
Perez reportedly said he could get notice anywhere from like 2 hours up to a whole day in advance.
Right.
And the prep involved a lot of packing materials, making sure Diddy had everything he might need for, say, 12 to 24 hours, so he wouldn't have to bother anyone.
And the source material actually gives a list, a very specific list of items for these nights, based on what Perez said.
It does, yeah, it's quite detailed. According to the reports, the list included food, liquor, music, red lights, condoms, lubricant, and, interestingly, sometimes honey. Yes, honey. The reports specifically mention it, and Perez testified it was noted as something that enhances the man's libido. That's a pretty specific detail to come out in testimony.
Definitely specific. Now, this is where, according to the reports, there seems to be a bit of conflict or maybe just clarification in Perez's own testimony about whether these tasks were actually part of his job.
Exactly. The questioning touched on whether arranging king nights and buying drugs were part of his official duties.
And initially,
the reports say Perez stated these were personal rather than work-related tasks. He apparently said they had nothing to do with work, and he didn't think he was paid for that specific stuff.
Okay, but then under redirect, when the prosecutor questioned him again?
Right. Under redirect, the reports state Perez confirmed that, yes, arranging these things was part of his job as a personal assistant. He clarified he wasn't doing it for free, and he never did these things when he was on holiday.
Ah.
The reports also add he testified his supervisor, Christina Courtroom, had actually told him to set up the King Knights.
So that's quite a shift, or at least a clarification, depending on how you look at it.
It is. It shows how questioning can draw out different aspects or framings.
And the reports also mention Diddy gave him specific instructions about these nights.
Yes. Perez testified Diddy explicitly told him not to discuss King Knights or drug use with anyone. Very strict instructions.
And did he estimate how much time this took up, these personal tasks?
He did, yeah. He reportedly estimated it was only about 1% of his total time working for Diddy. Just 1% on things like King Knights and drug buys.
1%, okay. What about personal items of Diddy's mentioned in the testimony?
Perez testified Diddy had this Gucci pouch, often had drugs and money in it, according to the reports, and he'd always have it with him during these King Nights.
Okay. The reports from day 23 also go into Perez's interactions related to someone identified just as Jane. What did his testimony cover there?
Well, according to the reports, he apparently helped Jane pick out things like lingerie, heels, dresses for the night she'd spend with Diddy. He reportedly said Jane trusted his opinion on what to buy.
And the defense attorney's questions about this are highlighted too.
Yes. During cross-examination, that's the defense questioning him, the lawyer reportedly asked specifically about Jane's willingness. Perez testified Jane was never hesitant, that she was a willing participant.
Okay.
And he also reportedly said he never saw her upset or unhappy after one of these nights. Now, it's important, as the reports note, that this came out under defense questioning.
Right, brought out by the defense. Were there text messages shown too?
Yes, the reports say the defense attorney, Brian Steele, showed the jury texts, apparently between Diddy, Jane, and Perez, planning King Nights, talking about packing things like underwear.
And there's also the specific incident involving a video, a sexually explicit video, that Perez testified about.
All right, this was another significant part. Perez reportedly testified about a sexually explicit video of Jane and another man being discovered. He said staff, a videographer actually, found it on an iPad used by staff.
Okay.
And according to Perez, Diddy was visible in the background of that video.
And how did he say that was handled? What happened with the iPad?
Perez reportedly took the iPad once it was found. He told both Diddy and Christina Coram about it. Diddy was apparently surprised.
Surprised.
That's what Perez testified. And Coram reportedly told Perez to give her the footage directly, said she'd deal with Diddy herself about it.
And this video came up again later.
It did, according to the reports. About 6 months after it was found, Coram apparently questioned Perez about how it was discovered. She told him she'd gotten a call from someone outside the company talking about the video.
Wow.
And here's a key detail from the reports. A recording of that conversation between Coram and Perez was recovered from Coram's phone, which had been seized. Perez reportedly testified he had no idea he was being recorded then.
That adds quite another layer, doesn't it? Especially regarding information control.
Absolutely.
The sources also link a specific date, June 18th, 2024, to the night of Jane's alleged assault and describe Perez's involvement that evening.
Yes. Perez reportedly testified that on June 18th, he dropped off some items for Jane, and then he dropped Diddy off at Jane's place. Several hours later, he said Diddy FaceTimed him.
And what was Diddy's demeanor on the call?
Perez described him as appearing annoyed and angry, voice raised.
And what was the call about?
He testified Diddy was asking him to confirm if another woman had been on a trip they took the week before. Perez said no.
And then?
Diddy hung up. Perez also mentioned he could see Jane on the call, but her back was to the camera. She didn't say anything. He couldn't see her face.
Okay. And just before we move off Perez's testimony completely, there was one other point the reports noted he made.
Yes, important point. Perez reportedly testified that it is time working for him. He never personally saw Diddy hit a woman, or anyone else for that matter.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears just a bit. There were a couple of other notable events reported from day 23 outside of Perez's testimony.
Right. One was kind of unexpected. Rapper Kanye West showed up at the courthouse.
Kanye West?
Yeah. Arrived, reportedly dressed all in white, with security.
Did he stay long?
No, the reports say only about 40 minutes. Then he left. Reporters asked if he was there supporting Diddy, and he apparently nodded and said yes.
Huh. Okay. And there was also testimony from a federal agent reported that day.
That's right. Homeland Security Special Agent Andre Lemon. He testified about the search of Diddy's L.A. home back in March 2024.
And what was a key detail from his testimony, according to the reports?
During cross-examination by defense attorney Mark Agnifilo, Agent Lamont was reportedly asked about guns and ammo found during the search.
Right.
Lamont confirmed they were found only in the home securities room, not elsewhere. He also confirmed he knew Diddy had a security detail.
Okay, so location specific. And finally, the reports mentioned this as sort of procedural issue, something about Diddy's conduct in court.
Yeah. Prosecutor Maureen Comey raised an issue with the judge, Judge Arun Subramanian. She said Diddy had been nodding emphatically during Agent Lamont's cross-examination and also when Jane was cross-examined earlier in the week.
And she felt that was inappropriate.
Yes. Comey argued it was inappropriate, even if he wasn't looking right at the jury.
How did the defense respond?
Defense attorney Brian Steele countered. He reportedly argued Diddy hadn't looked at the jury, hadn't done anything inappropriate at all. He said Mr. Combs did nothing inappropriate at all today or any day, actually.
So what did the judge say?
Judge Subramanian acknowledged they'd discussed interacting with the jury before. The rules were clear. He reportedly said something like, people react to testimony. It's impossible to police every single reaction.
Makes sense.
But he reiterated, any attempt to actually communicate with the jury, absolutely not allowed. The reports noted Comey wasn't asking for Diddy to be removed or anything, just flagging the nodding.
Okay, so that really does give us a detailed snapshot based purely on these reports of day 23. We covered Jonathan Perez's testimony pretty extensively, his job, the salary, those king nights with that memorable shopping list.
Right, the honey?
The honey. And how his description of the job maybe shifted a bit under questioning that whole incident with the video on the iPad, the June 18th call.
And then the other bits, too, Kanye's brief visit, the agent's testimony about where the guns were found, and that courtroom discussion about Diddy nodding during testimony.
Yeah. So this whole deep dive just focused on what was reported for this single day, using only the material you gave us. It offers a really specific glimpse into the evidence being presented and the courtroom atmosphere.
It really does. And it makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just looking at the material from this one day, the assistant describing duties differently under different questioning, the whole complexity around that video, the recording of the phone call. When you rely on witness accounts like this, presented and questioned in specific ways, what does this snapshot really tell you about the challenge of figuring out the absolute truth in these really complicated legal cases?
That's definitely something to chew on just based on today's reports. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.